The following action research project was undertaken in a Stage 1 Year 1 class at Chipping Norton Public School. This research project endeavoured to incorporate the MEE framework for engagement through the implementation of collaborative, hands-on and relatable learning experiences. This project aimed to transform the traditional learning and teaching processes that still exist in education today and to shift from standard educative processes to learning experiences that are highly operative, cognitive and effective. Chipping Norton Public School is located in southwestern Sydney. The socio-economic status of the community is above the national average. Chipping Norton has a strong representation of cultural diversity, with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders making up 2.1% of the community. 37% of population being born overseas, with a large Vietnamese, Lebanese, Italian, Chinese, Greek and New Zealand cultural composite. Chipping Norton Public School has a current enrolment of 342 students across 14 K-6 classes. The school itself also has a diverse community, with 64% of students from a language background other than English. Arabic, Vietnamese and Greek being their largest cultural groups. 3% of students identify as Indigenous. The school has a resolute focus on literacy and numeracy achievement and incorporates mini-lit, multi-lit and mathematical specialist programs across all stages with the provision of support staff. The school also caters to the needs of EALD students by providing an EALD consultant who works on the school site. For my final practicum, I was allocated a Stage 1 Year 1 class made up of 26 students. The class is highly diverse in culture and level of academic achievement. 70% of students are working at the expected level, 15% below and 15% above. One child is diagnosed with autism and is non-verbal at school. 2 students are diagnosed with a mild intellectual disability. There is 1 student with a diagnosis of oppositional defiance disorder, ADHD and anxiety. There are 3 students who currently receive EALD support and 3 students who receive additional in-class support for their learning needs. My mentor teacher has 10 years professional experience working across all stages, and she assisted me greatly during the formulation and implementation of this research project. Throughout my research, my focus group played a vital role in providing support during the formulation of my research question, deconstruction of data, and overall analysis of my research plan. I kept an active dialogue with my focus group throughout my practicum and was able to support one another greatly through the entire action research cycle. Together, we formulated questions that would guide our research and inform specific focuses during our action research. During my first practicum, I saw the benefits of hands-on learning in a kindergarten class. When beginning my final practicum on a Year 1 class, I began observing the learning behaviours of the students and noticed the students were lacking in effective engagement and motivation for learning. When formulating my research question, I chose to focus on the area of collaborative, hands-on and relatable learning experiences. When observing my practicum class during lessons, students demonstrated off-task, disinterested and disengaged behaviour. Through my research project, I endeavoured to create learning experiences that were exciting and genuinely enjoyable for the students, linking to the MEE framework through highly effective learning. My experiences throughout this case study have brought to light the transformative nature of action research. Through reflection upon my research plan, engagement in professional discussion with fellow teachers and focus group, and implementing various teaching strategies within the classroom, the importance and the effectiveness of the action research cycle became clear to me. Through this action research plan, I aim to be able to further develop and improve my own professional practice in providing engaging and motivating learning experiences for students. Through the use of collaborative learning, I aim to create a classroom of social interaction and active discussion where students could not only develop academically, but also socially and emotionally. This focus on the social learning theory highlighted the possible opportunities for cognitive stimulation, shared learning, and improved self-efficacy for students. The MEE framework also aligns well with my action research focus, as I aimed to motivate students through a learning environment that promoted self-efficacy and self-belief. Linked with a small e of engagement, I endeavoured to create learning experiences that were highly effective, cognitive, and operative, while delivering engaging messages to students through learning activities. Employing these teaching strategies would provide me with an opportunity to create more motivating and engaging educative experiences for the students in the early years. In turn, I would address the big E of engagement and create a love for learning where students valued education and felt as though school was for them. The MEE framework aligns with my own personal teaching philosophy, as I aim to provide a high quality education for my students where the students experience deeper levels of engagement and personal motivation for their learning achievement. Moreover, the Inside a Classroom also aligns with my philosophy, as I aim to promote a classroom where power is shared between my students and myself through creating a community of learners. Through conversations with my mentor teacher and school principal, I was not required to receive parental consent from all students within the class, as this was covered by the school's enrolment policy. I was, however, required to receive consent from the school principal and my mentor teacher. These consent forms were provided to and signed by both my mentor and principal as evidence within Appendix 1, in order to obtain permission for me to conduct my action research and collect student data within the classroom. Observations were made during and after students completed learning experiences that were collaborative and hands-on by my mentor teacher and myself. These observations were recorded in teacher feedback and reflection forms and provided avenues for teacher reflection and areas that required improvement to achieve optimal engagement for students. My observations focused on cues from body language, behaviour, peer discussions, and quantity and quality of completed work. I looked closely at the level of engagement students were demonstrating during their learning and whether or not they were genuinely enjoying the tasks at hand to determine if they were learning through the cognitive, operative, and effective levels of engagement. Active dialogue between students and myself were recorded during collaborative and hands-on tasks. These conversations reflected the degree to which students could work successfully and communicated the cognitive, effective, and operative outcomes achieved during student learning. Work samples collected during learning provided tangible evidence to the success of the action research focus and gave relevant insight into the evolution of student learning in a collaborative student learning environment, and were collected as photographic evidence as students engaged in and completed collaborative tasks and used concrete materials. Finally, at the conclusion of all collaborative and hands-on learning experiences, students completed various self-reflective responses through the use of a traffic light system, thumbs up, thumbs down, and 1 to 4 finger strategy. We had open reflective discussions about what we found difficult and what we enjoyed about the specific tasks, and students completed exit slips to demonstrate their attitude towards collaborative and hands-on learning. During student-teacher conferencing in literacy lessons, students used the 2 stars and a wish method to self-assess their knowledge and work to highlight their strengths and areas in need of improvement. This use of data helped me inform, guide, and improve future lessons and teaching. In the beginning of my practicum, through observations of student learning behaviour, I noticed students would quite often become disengaged and disinterested during modelled, guided, and independent learning activities. Quite early on in the implementation of my action research, I observed a positive shift in student behaviour. Through the collaborative learning opportunities I provided for students, they displayed an increased motivation for learning and were eager and enthusiastic when participating in group work. During lessons that involved collaborative learning, I created an environment of discussion and encouraged students to think, question, and evaluate their ideas through listening to the thoughts of others. By incorporating the social learning theory into my classroom, I found that students developed stronger communication skills and the ability to work more effectively with a group. When listening to learning conversations between students, it became clear that through social learning opportunities, students supported one another in achieving the lesson success criteria. While these were my research findings for most students, collaborative learning did not achieve the same level of effectiveness for one particular student. As a teacher, it is crucial that we know our students and how they learn and program accordingly. Due to the evolution of action research, I was able to continually reflect on these teaching processes and their impact on student learning outcomes, and adjust my teaching to accommodate the needs of each student. When facilitating hands-on learning for students, it was clear that they were more deeply engaged in their learning through a genuine enjoyment for tasks and the ability to touch and manipulate concrete materials to demonstrate and further develop their understanding of syllabus content. Through the use of concrete materials, students were able to retain and reflect on their own learning. During these lessons, students displayed more on-task behaviour as they were learning through stimulation at a cognitive, operative and affective level. Overall, through collaborative and hands-on learning experiences, students began to believe in their personal learning ability as well as demonstrated enthusiasm and a willingness to learn. Through the nature of my research, I sought to encourage the big E of engagement and the idea of school is for me through exciting and engaging learning experiences that assisted in developing a value for education. The effectiveness of my action research plan can be seen in evidence of observations taken during collaborative and hands-on lessons. In these images, students are working collaboratively to complete a range of literacy activities based on grammar, punctuation, and reading and writing skills. All of the resources were hands-on and students worked collaboratively with their peers to complete the tasks. As students completed these tasks, they demonstrated deep engagement at a cognitive, operative and affective level. Students were thinking critically and applying their knowledge of learnt grammar and punctuation concepts. Students were working hard and were in control of their own learning once the activities had been explained. During these tasks, students felt a sense of enjoyment and were enthusiastic about being engaged in the learning process. Through these learning activities, I ensured that there were clear messages of engagement for students through ability, control, and voice. Students felt as though they were capable as the learning was accessible for all individuals. They supported one another and they shared the classroom environment through discussion. Through these engaging messages, the small E of engagement was achieved. These observations were also supported by my mentor teacher, who highlighted the increased student engagement during collaborative tasks. Through recording of student conversations, I was able to analyse and evaluate the benefits and effectiveness on social learning within my practicum class. A conversation between 3 students during a collaborative brainstorming task brought to light the positive effects that social learning can have on the learning outcomes for students. In this conversation, students supported one another in the development of ideas and ensured they were doing what was required to meet the lesson success criteria. Students bounced ideas off one another and demonstrated rich engagement at an effective level. Students were enthusiastic and were able to think more creatively when encouraged by their peers. Student Conversation 2 is between a student and myself. This learning conversation demonstrates engagement at a highly effective level. This student was genuinely interested and enthusiastic about the hands-on learning activities provided and wanted to extend themselves and complete additional tasks. This demonstrates the small E of engagement and a strong motivation for learning, as the student displays self-efficacy and a genuine value for their learning. Student Conversation 3 demonstrates students being engaged at a cognitive and operative level. Students apply higher order thinking skills to work out a mathematical equation using the strategy of repeated addition. Students worked together to complete the question and applied their knowledge of mathematical concepts to demonstrate their understanding. The student work samples in this slide show the result of collaborative learning. Students were learning about multiplication through repeated addition, where one student had to visually represent the sentence while the other student wrote it down as a number sentence. This task was quite simple. However, through collaboration and hands-on materials, students displayed genuine interest and commitment to learning this skill. Students were engaged at a cognitive and operative level as they used higher order thinking to apply mathematical processes and concepts. The image on the left shows students using straws to model 2D shapes. During this activity, Students were excited and enthusiastic as they had the opportunity to collaborate and discuss their thoughts with their peers. Students were encouraged to use trial and error and were encouraged to make mistakes during their learning. Students were engaged at a cognitive, operative, and affective level during this task through the application of mathematical concepts and higher order thinking skills to problem solve. These work samples show completed learning activities where students had to show 2 equal groups of cookies and cut a pizza into 8 equal pieces to represent 8 when learning about fractions. For this particular task, I used the concept of sharing cookies and cutting a pizza to teach students the concept of fractions. All students were able to link these mathematical concepts to their life experiences through the idea of food. Students demonstrated engagement in this task at a cognitive and affective level. Students had a genuine enjoyment for this task and were able to relate these mathematical ideas to other real-life situations. Students had open discussions with their peers during this learning and used mathematical language and processes to successfully complete this task. These work samples show students engaged in hands-on literacy activities. Students explored prefixes and suffixes and categorized the ed suffix into its correct sound. Students were able to demonstrate higher order thinking skills and knowledge of correct metalanguage to demonstrate engagement at a cognitive level. Students encouraged and supported one another as they completed these hands-on learning activities with genuine enjoyment. Through student self-assessment and reflection, I was able to gauge how the students were feeling with their learning and use this to inform and plan future teaching and learning. Through self-assessment strategies of the traffic light system, thumbs up, thumbs down, and 1 to 4 finger method, students were able to think deeply about aspects of their learning. During reflective conversations, I asked questions from the REAL framework to gauge student engagement and achievement. Through the REAL framework questions, students were able to make connections between their learning and real-life application. Students also used 2 stars and a wish during the writing process to assess their own learning and to highlight their strengths and areas that needed improvement. Through my action research, I found the processes of student self-assessment and reflection to be the most accurate measure of student engagement. Students were given opportunities to share their thoughts and feelings about their learning at cognitive, operative, and affective levels and provide critical feedback about whether students were engaged in learning. This also incorporates ideas from the inside a classroom where students take responsibility for their own learning and begin to analyse their own academic achievement. It is through assessment and reflection of teaching and learning that teachers can determine whether the small e and big E of engagement have been achieved. When conducting action research, it is important to understand that there may be often short and long-term limitations. For my action research plan, I had to ensure that collaborative and hands-on learning would be an effective teaching strategy to suit the needs of the students in my practicum class. While my research question was appropriate and accessible for this context, it is important to note that it may not work for other students or in a different context. My action research conducted in a Stage 1 Year 1 class found that collaborative, hands-on and relatable learning experiences were effective in not only providing deeply engaging learning experiences that increased academic achievement, but also in the social and emotional development of students. Through creating learning experiences and encouraging a classroom of social learning, students were able to learn effectively through cognitive, operative and affective levels. This research has highlighted to me the importance of creating motivating and engaging learning opportunities that address both the small e and the big E of engagement. Conducting this research during my final practicum has allowed me to develop a deeper appreciation for professional development and professional reflection. The evolution of the action research cycle has also allowed me to further develop my teaching philosophy and professional pedagogies. Appendix 1 provides evidence of the signed consent forms I received from my mentor teacher and school principal. Appendix 3 demonstrates my active participation within my focus group. My participation within this focus group is strongly reflective of the social learning that is addressed throughout my action research.